Hello, everyone. My name is Joe. I'm with the Santa Fe Dehumidifier Tech team. In this video, I will review the recommended dehumidifier installation and offer some tech tips along the way. So let's get started. So um, this is a diagram of the recommended installation. We call it the dedicated return supply to supply. This information is in the dehumidifier manual, or there's some more specific documents on the product page as well. But what we mean by dedicated return and supply to supply means the dehumidifier itself, which is this box down here, has a separate return that's separate from the HVAC return. This is done for many reasons, and we'll get into that later. Also, supply to supply means that the supply or the exhaust air from the dehumidifier is going into the supply or the exhaust air of the air handler. So there's a bunch of reasons we want to do this. Again, this is the recommended installation. Probably about 90% or more of the uh, installations of dehumidifiers should be done this way. There's more pros than cons with this method. We do have some alternate installation methods, but those are for more rare and specific applications. So let's get started. So the first step in installing the dehumidifier, obviously after you've sized the space and how much moisture you have, and you know what size dehumidifier you need, uh, you're gonna want to figure out where you're going to break into the HVAC supply to put the duct here. Now, one of the big things is we want to make sure that the duct pressure in the HVAC supply is under zero point 0.4 inches of static pressure. If it's higher than that, that could reduce the airflow through the dehumidifier, basically making the dehumidifier function poorly or not at all. So, um, generally, you want to try to put if possible, you want to put the duct as far away from the air handler as you can, but before any of the duct branches. That'll ensure that the dehumidifier air gets through evenly throughout the whole home. But the further down you put it, generally you can have less duct pressure. The less duct pressure, the more air flows through the dehumidifier, the more efficient it is. Also, one of the things in certain applications, it's really hard to break into the ducts, but just be mindful. If you break into say, around close to the air handler, you want to make sure you don't blow this dehumidified air, which is going to be warm and dry, directly at the air conditioning coil. That can potentially cause the air conditioner to have some issues. I guess on checking the duct pressure, what you'll need is a manometer. So I have a couple examples here, and this is kind of an example of how you would take that. So this is a digital manometer. They have like analog gauge manometers that are a little cheaper, whatever works best for you. But either way, they have these. They call them pitot tubes, but what you would do is take the duct, drill, usually it's like about an eighth inch hole into the duct, and insert the pitot tube, and then get a duct pressure measurement. In this case, it's zero point 0.2 inches of static, which is totally fine. Usually you'll see like 0.1 or so, but again, if it's zero point 0.4 inches or higher, that would be a problem. If it is, we do have some other insulation methods that could help prevent that issue. So either way, it might be good to invest in one of those just to make sure the dehumidifier is going to run correctly. Um, the next thing in the installation is you want to make sure you have a backdraft damper. The reason why we have a backdraft damper is the air is moving through the air handler. If the dehumidifier is off, so your air conditioner is on, but your dehumidifier is off, so your heat's on. Usually, when you're heating your home, you're not going to have the dehumidifier running. You don't want that air going backwards through the dehumidifier. Obviously, when the dehumidifier is off, its blower will be off. Um, this backdraft damper or check damper will close and prevent that air from going backwards. So here I have a couple different damper types. This is a gravity damper. This is probably the most common, cost-effective damper that you'll see. Basically, what it does is just has a rod that goes through the center of it. This blade here is more weighted on the bottom side, so if there's no air pressure, it just falls down and blocks the airflow. Um, uh, the next type is what we call a butterfly damper. These are a little bit more expensive, but they do offer a little bit better duct sealing. You can see in the back here where there is some like rubber gasketing or whatnot. Not to say if this cheaper one leaks, it's a big deal, but uh, these are just another option. I would suggest to steer away from these. One of the reasons for that is you can kind of see there's a spring here, and those springs are keeping those butterfly blades closed. Some manufacturers have a really, really stiff spring, and potentially it's hard for the blower and the dehumidifier to overcome that and open the butterfly damper. If you've got a manufacturer that's got a pretty light spring, these can work great. I've seen them work just fine. It's just that's one of the cautions I've seen a lot out there that do have a stiffer spring. Um, the biggest thing about both of these dampers is making sure they're open. So after you install the dehumidifier, you run the air handler, turn the dehumidifier on. You want to make sure that these actually open. So that's a check. That can be a little hard to do because you're going to have ducting on either side. You actually can't see inside it, right? On this gravity type damper, there's a rod going through the center, so you could put a piece of tape or a mark on the end of the rod and then see that rod move um, 90 degrees or whatnot to make sure that it actually opens. Butterfly damper is going to be a little bit harder. You may have to actually kind of look inside the duct or, just verify airflow and another means. Another option, which is this is going to be the most expensive option, but it gives more of a positive feedback that the damper is actually open. This is just a 24 volt AC power or motorized damper. So basically, you can wire it in a way that when the dehumidifier or the fan on the dehumidifier turns on, this damper will actually power itself open. So we don't have to worry about if there's too much duct pressure in the HVAC supply, or if the dehumidifier doesn't have enough pressure to open it, or potentially these gravity type dampers could get stuck, that kind of thing. This is just more of a reliable option. But either way, just a couple different types. So the next thing we'll look at is the dedicated return. So again, it's separated from the HVAC return. The reason we do that is there's going to be some negative air pressure in the HVAC return. If we hook the HVAC return, the HVAC return, the dehumidifier return together, that would create a negative pressure in the dehumidifier intake or return. And kind of like what I was saying about the 0.4 inches of static in the HVAC supply, when you're pulling against the negative on the return side, that makes it harder for the blower. So if you had, let's say, 0.2 inches of negative pressure and plus 2 inches of positive pressure, you would have to add those together and you would get 0.4. So think of it in that way. That's really how hard the dehumidifier is actually working, or the blower on the dehumidifier is actually working. So that can cause problems, and it can also cause recirculation issues just on how it's ducted or whatnot. So uh, it's best to have a dedicated return. One of the other things about a dedicated return is sometimes you place a dehumidifier in a spot that's really hard to get to. Changing the filter can be a little hard. So putting this in a wall or even on the ceiling or whatnot, depending on where it's at, you can change the filter in this dedicated return, making it a little bit easier for the customer to maintenance or yourself as well. So this is just an example of a dedicated return. It's just a normal intake grill. Obviously, usually there's some tabs or some screws or whatever that you take off. Filter sits right into it. And again, you would just be changing that filter. So that would just be, cutting into the sheetrock wall. The only thing I would recommend is, depending on the dehumidifier you have, you just want to make sure you have at or bigger the amount of surface area that's on the the intake of the dehumidifier to make sure you have enough airflow going through it. So bigger is always better. The bigger filter you got into it, the less you have to change it. It's always a good idea. So um, next thing we'll look at is the fresh air intake. So there's a bunch of different components here. We got the outdoor inlet grill, we got the motorized damper, and we also have a manual damper here. If you wanted, this is an option, but if you wanted fresh air to come in, you can use the dehumidifier's fan for that and basically just pull in air from the outside. That just kind of, again, freshens the air in your house, gets some of those, bad gases, replaces the oxygen. Um, it's certainly a good idea. A lot of codes now are requiring that, so it's something probably you'll eventually have to do. So. Um, this is just normal 6-inch ducting. I've got a couple of things here, components that you'll actually need. So um, you'll need a 24 VAC power motorized damper. When you're running ventilation, this will actually turn on. Depending on the control you have, it'll also turn on the fan and run the fan to draw air in. We also sell what is called a smart damper. You can look on our website for that. This is kind of a nice piece, obviously a little bit more expensive, but it does use less power to run. So you're just running off the 24 AC power that the dehumidifier uh, puts out, and that's limited. So this pulls a little bit less power. So if you have a lot of motorized dampers or a lot of other things running, this could kind of help bring that power usage down. Also, the big thing about this one is it has its own internal controls. So it can run independent. You don't need a little ventilation control. It has its own ventilation control, and it has some options for like the ASHRAE standard and some other standards or whatnot. It also has like in the temperature limits or whatnot, so it'll shut itself off if it gets too hot or too cold outside to prevent those kind of issues. Um, the next thing is you'll need an outdoor intake grill. So not like a dryer vent. This is going to be open all the time, but um, you want some kind of a grill on it just to prevent critters and whatnot getting into it. But basically, there's a bunch of different styles of this. There's plastic ones, there's metal ones, or whatnot. But this is just a typical one. So, going back to the diagram here. So you want to use insulated flex duct because that air could be pretty cold, could condense on the outside. So make sure that's insulated. I would probably pick a lot of times they have like R6 and R10 type insulation where the silver is the silver outside instead of the black plastic outside color. Silver usually is a little bit thicker. I would recommend that, especially if you're in a northern climate that can get pretty cold. Um, but either way, you would just run this outside. That's where your outdoor intake grill would go. Motorized damper. Generally, you want to put that probably as close to the inlet grill as possible. That way, this section of it is going to get cold if it's outside or whatnot, um, with that cold air coming in. And that'll just prevent having, the least amount of duct that's going to be cold. Um, and then once you have that all installed, you would turn on the air handler, turn on the dehumidifier itself, and then you actually need to take a airflow check. So this is a hot wire anemometer. This is typically what most people use, but this can tell you how much CFM is going through it. You'll need to do this check just so you know how much CFM is going through the fresh air. Depending on your code or whatnot, you'll need that measurement to do your calculation for air changes per hour, um, so you can make sure that's right. Now, if you're getting too much airflow, there is a plastic damper a manual damper on the unit, has this little arm on it, but you can turn this, up and down to make sure that you're getting the right amount of airflow, through that. Now, depending on the situation, you might not be getting enough. Maybe say you have a big home or a long duct run, so it's just you're not flowing the right amount of air. This is a duct booster, just has a little bit of a fan in it, and that can be put in line to kind of boost up the airflow and get you to the CFM that's required for your application. Um, Next, it's not shown on this picture, but the dehumidifier will have to have a drain. Um, so we'll kind of go to this slide here. Drain traps are important. And I'll kind of tell you the reason why. The dehumidifiers use what's called a negative air pressure drain pan. So where the blower is positioned in the unit, air is actually sucking backwards through this through the drain. In certain situations, that rush of airflow back into the unit can kind of hold the water back in the unit, and that could potentially make the water in the drain pan get too full and then overflow the drain pan and make the unit leak out of the corners. So especially that's more prevalent if you have like a lot of duct pressure or the filter hasn't changed, or say there's a problem with the dehumidifier, maybe defrost system's not working well, or it just ices over. The more you choke that down, the more it's going to want to pull air through the drain, and cause that issue. So either way, what we recommend is a drain trap. Um, so basically what that does is like a P-trap underneath your sink. Use that to prevent the sewer gases from smelling. But in this case, we're putting that water in there so the air cannot go backwards through the drain line. So now we're just using the weight of the water to go through the drain trap and drain out. A couple little features here. Um, if especially there's a vent here, you want to make sure, especially if you're hooking this drain line, say into the air conditioner's drain line, which usually the air conditioner has a positive pressure drain pan, which can push more airflow backwards through it, which would be bad. You want to put that vent here, so that will release that air pressure and make this drain work more correctly. Uh, the last thing in the drain pan, one of the tech tips is the end of the drain line. We don't really kind of show it here, but you don't want this below water. So a lot of times you're using a clear vinyl hose or whatnot, but where you terminate it at. So meaning if you put it down in the sump pump, a floor drain, something like that, you want to make sure that the end of the drain line isn't below water. That can cause air to get trapped in the hose and potentially prevent the drain from leaking. We usually say you want the water to fall out of the end of the hose into the water. Um, Again, the vent helps with that. Also, in this situation here, there's a lot of uh, you'll probably see this on your HVAC system, but they'll have a vent coming right out of the dehumidifier, really right out of the air conditioner. A lot of times that vent is open, but that's if the vent's open, that's made for a positive pressure positive pressure drain pan, which air conditioners usually are. In this negative pressure drain pan situation, you want to have a cap on that because if you don't, that defeats the whole purpose of this. Basically, air is able to get through this vent back into the unit, so you want to make sure you cap that off. It's good to have this here and have the cap removable. You want to make sure it's air sealed, but that can help it be removed for cleaning and whatnot. So, um, but that's all the tech tips and recommended installation practices. If you have any questions, you can go to our website. At the bottom of the website, there's a contact link that you can email into us or whatnot. But you can also call the tech line at this number at these times. So good talking with you today, and please reach out if you need any help. Thank you.